Here comes Janet, just in time. Happy birthday, Janet.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday, Janet.
Happy birthday, Janet.
Just another day.
Yeah. Yeah, once you're past 21, there's not much to look forward to, is there?
Just 39.
39, okay. Okay.
Janet, I know differently. We went to school together, and
Okay.
John and Katrina.
The secrets, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, we are recording, so we won't share those secrets right now.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for joining. Hopefully this is the first of many consecutive weeks that we'll meet. It's certainly been a bumpy ride the last 6 weeks or so, as we've had to cancel for various reasons, but hopefully we're back in the swing of things now. Does anybody have any Shalom moments you'd like to share from the last couple weeks?
Well, I saw a golden crown kinglet this morning right on the ground in front of me, and he was hopping all over the place. That's always a Shalom moment.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Is that a rare bird?
It's not rare, but often they're high up in the trees. This was a
Okay.
really good look at it.
Great. Anyone else?
The winter landscape is just beautiful when you drive.
Yes.
Janet and I were driving outside of Bangor into the fields, past St. Peter's Church around in there. And there's so many farmers' fields that are just go on and on. I mean, it's just a blessing to have all this beautiful land to look at. And in the snow, it's just a whole different landscape. So pretty. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's not a lot of snow. It's just a little bit, but it's
No,
enough. It's enough. Yeah. And it is not going to be melting this weekend from what I hear. It's going to be cold. So,
And we may get more.
yeah, on Sunday night, I guess. Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm just glad it's going to avoid interfering with worship this week. So, all right, we're going to move on to chapter 5, graduation and settling down. So before we jump in there, what memories do you have about graduation or about perhaps settling down in a new home or something like that? What feelings come up when you think about that?
I graduated the week of the Reading Air Show, and we were outside in the high school football field for the graduation, and the air show was just a few miles away, and we were under strict orders not to watch the airplanes as they soared over us, which is very hard to do because the Blue Angels, the Navy's jet team, was performing that night, so it was kind of hard not to watch.
Yeah. I was glad to graduate, but then when I look back, I think those were the best years.
Yeah, I have the opposite feeling. I could just as well do without them.
Well, and you've graduated quite a few times, Dad, from
That's true, I have.
high school, from college, and from seminary 3 times.
Yes, yes.
Ooh, did you flunk out?
I just kept going back for more degrees. I'm one of these guys with an alphabet soup behind his name, you see, you know.
Yeah.
It's more fun to keep going to school than deal with reality, so.
Mhm.
I did that too. I kept on going till I was 50. Didn't stop.
I always find it interesting how graduation seminary is often called a commencement, you know, which is a word that means a beginning. Whereas, you know, in the moment, I usually thought of it as an ending.
Right.
But I think that's to me, that's an important part of it, is that a graduation is never the end of something, or at least not only the end of something. It's also, you know, the beginning of using that knowledge and that information in a different way. Any other thoughts about what graduation feels like?
Well, I remember when I graduated from seminary, I went to high school, college, and seminary, and that whole time you always had breaks. You had Christmas vacation and you had spring breaks and summer off. And when I finally graduated from seminary and started working, it was like, oh, I'm not going to get these breaks anymore.
I remember having the exact same feeling.
I was so used to this routine that every year at Thanksgiving, you got a few days off. Then at Christmas, you got a week or more off. And it just went that way. And all of a sudden, that wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real world. Yeah.
It was called vacation when you worked and you had to earn it.
Yeah.
That's true.
From a different perspective, as a teacher,
Mm.
like I used to go to the graduations, and then when I had kids, I got to the end of the year, I'm like, oh, it's just too much trying to figure out how to get back to the school when you have young kids. So there were a few years that I didn't go. And I feel like at the end of the year is so crazy. Like you have so much work to do as a teacher, trying to get everything graded and all the exams graded and all the grades turned in. And it's like, it's a very compressed time, and the kids don't want to be there anymore. So they're not fun. And I felt like the years I didn't go to the graduation ceremony, I felt like you ended the year on kind of a bad note. And then when I was able to start going again, like graduation day, like after the ceremony, if especially if they had it outside, the kids are all just walking around hugging each other. And even if a kid like was a pain in the butt in your classroom, if you saw them, they were all like, "Oh, hi," like it was like a completely different atmosphere, and
Yeah.
it helped end the year on such a better note than if you didn't go to graduation. Like we weren't obligated to go to graduation until like I don't know, the last couple of years, and then they were like, yeah, they wanted all the teachers there, but it just made the end of the year like nice to go to graduation. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. That's a very different perspective than most of us have. Appreciate that. Anything else? Okay. Well, as we're going to see, the Israelites were in a 40-year learning program in the wilderness, but then they graduated and they settled down in a new land. So that's where we'll start on page 16. Let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll start reading. Let us pray. God, we thank you for being with us through all of the graduations and changes in our lives. As you've as one part of our life has ended, another one has always begun, and you've been with us through all of it. As we study the words of the story of your people's graduation from the wilderness school, help us to hear its message for us today. Help us to grow in understanding and faith and love toward you. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, the order of people I see on my screen is Kathy, June, Joe, Kim, Karen, Janet, and Mary. So Kathy, would you like to read the first paragraph on page 16?
After many years in the wilderness school and after failing many exams, God's partner people were ready for graduation, entry into the land where they would live the way they had learned in the wilderness. As they approached the boundary, God's heart was glad. Yahweh believed that these people would live differently from all other nations. God dreamed of the result. All the nations on earth, attracted by the witness of these people, would gather to learn the Manna way, God and humans and nature living together in peace. God looked at planet Earth and cried out, "There is hope. My dream will come true. My promise is unfolding."
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One thing I think is interesting to point out is that historians have estimated that if a group of people were to walk from Egypt to the Promised Land, Today, it would probably take about 11 days, but it took 40 years, which kind of tells us that there was something going on besides just getting from point A to point B. What do you notice in this paragraph, though, about kind of how God's feeling, the way the author has described it here? What are the emotions that God is feeling here?
It says God's heart was glad.
Glad.
He's hopeful.
Mhm.
Mm.
I think I hear a little bit of pride. God's proud of these people.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like the way Kim described going to graduation as a teacher. That even if, and certainly some of these people God had led through the wilderness had been pains in the butt along the way. So God's plan of mending the universe is now reaching a kind of a new phase. God here dreams that it's not only a good thing for them, but that it's going to be a good thing for the whole world. All the nations on earth will be attracted here. Another thing that strikes me here is that we often talk about, and we should talk about having faith in God. But here, I see God having faith in the people. Do you think God has faith in you?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
What does that mean for your life then?
There's, you feel like you have a cheering squad, like you can do it. I have
Mhm.
confidence in you. You can do it.
Yeah.
I have a sign that says faith does not make things easy, it makes them possible. With God by my side, anything is possible.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at the picture here. What do you see in this picture?
I know this PS is Psalm, but when I first saw it, I'm thinking public school 104.
Oh, yeah. I bet a lot of people from New York City would see it that way. Yeah, yeah.
I wonder what that Psalm says. Let's see. Let's look it up.
You gonna look it up? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up.
Well, Mary's looking that up. What else do you see in this picture?
Oh, they're near the Dead Sea.
They're near the Dead Sea. Yep. This sea looks dead.
I have it now.
Okay, go ahead and read it to us.
Okay. There go the ships. And how do you pronounce that word? Levin?
Leviathan.
And Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it.
Yeah. So Leviathan is a Hebrew word for a sea monster of some sort. And that's the way that Erlander drew the sea monster.
The psalmist's imagination is caught up with God's mysterious sea. On its surface, ships glide to and from distant ports, while underneath lurks the monster.
Yep.
I forgot how to pronounce.
So there, what the sea that we're seeing there is the Mediterranean Sea, and there's the ships and the sea monsters there. You've got the Dead Sea here in the front. And what do you think that that line is that connects that to another lake? Can you guess?
Land?
No, I think it's a river.
It's a river. And any guesses what river that is?
The Jordan. I don't know.
It is the Jordan River. Yes. The Jordan River goes from the Sea of Galilee in the north, which is the smaller lake on the right, to the Dead Sea in the south. And this is where Where we're told that they entered the promised land by crossing the Jordan River here. So what's going on at this river crossing in the picture here?
Moses is preaching to the people,
Moses is preaching. Yeah, right at the boundary.
telling them how to live.
Mhm. And do you see what's in the land here? What are those black things, do you think, in the land?
Shelters.
Castles.
Yeah, I think the triangles to me kind of symbolize mountains, and then those things with the little squares on top look like castles or fortresses of some point. And I think to me what this is saying is that the land was very hilly, which it was, and also that there were already people there. You know, they weren't coming to an empty land, which is absolutely true. So let's read on. June, are you ready to read the next paragraph?
Yes. The graduation ceremony took place at the boundary on the east side of the Jordan River. Moses delivered a powerful commencement address. Excuse me. He reminded the people of God's wonderful acts on their behalf. He pleaded with the people to remember God's love and the lessons Yahweh had taught them. Moses urged them to respond by living as a wilderness people when they became landed. He also told the covenant people these words. Should I continue?
Yes, please.
When you follow the way of righteousness and mercy, you will bring blessings and happiness to yourself and to your society. Then you will choose life, and you and your children will live. Number 2, when you do not follow the way of the righteous and mercy, you'll bring sadness and curse to yourselves and to your society. Your society will rot and smell foul, like the hoarded manna in the wilderness.
Okay, thank you. Do any of you remember the commencement speeches at your graduations? I don't remember mine. But we have Moses is recorded here. And what's Moses, how would you summarize this? What's Moses telling the people?
How good God was to them, and they should continue living as the wilderness people.
Yep, God's been good to you. Keep living this way. Anything else?
Or they should follow the way of righteous and mercy. Otherwise, they're going to have sadness and a curse, and society will rot and smell foul like hoarded manna.
Yeah, remember what the manna did if they got too much and hoarded it overnight? It turned foul and grew worms. Here Moses is telling them that that's the way your life's going to be if you act like that. How would you say our world is doing these two things? We'll start with in what way is our society or our community following the way of righteousness and mercy? Where do you see that happening?
Well, I can see that both thing 1 and 2, the positivity that I hear in the media, and I hear people talk about things that are happening. There is always a bright side, and even about a person, like that person's really difficult or whatever. Well, there's always something that you can see that's wonderful about that person. And then the other opposite, there's people will sometimes focus on the negativity, and the negativity seems to block them from their spiritual sides to me, because they're always focused on this negative, and they see everything black. And it's hard to be around people who are constantly doing, saying things like that. I feel badly for them because they see life as negative.
it's like they're living in a world of that's foul and rotten, and
Right,
they can't
yeah.
see anything else, and it makes it kind of rotten to be around them sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. How else do you see that in the world today, whether it's in our own community or our congregation or on the national scale or however?
I think in organizations that advocate for the well-being of the poor and the vulnerable, for people who have been forgotten, for people who are not powerful, organizations like Bloom, Bangor, for example, the Lutheran Church's refugee program, things like that, I think are advocating for the kind of world that God wanted the Israelites to live.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's read the first two paragraphs on the next page then.
First two, okay.
Yeah.
After Moses conferred the diplomas, he sang a beautiful song of praise. Then he climbed Mount Nebo and looked at the promised land. There he died, never to enter the land himself. Before he died, Moses blessed the people and prayed that they would never forget how God had liberated them and made a covenant promise with them. He prayed that they would never reject the manna way, the beautiful life of the covenant gift. Joshua, Moses' successor, led the people over the Jordan River and into the promised land. The people carried a box with them which contained the jar of manna and the stone tablets, the covenant gift. The people looked at the box and remembered the lessons they had learned in the wilderness.
Okay, thank you. So Moses doesn't quite make it into the promised land. In fact, according to the story as written, there's only two people who made it all the way from Egypt to the promised land. It was Joshua and Caleb. And everyone else who made it across were born on the way. You know, it was the descendants of those who had left Egypt. So Moses was certainly the leader of this group. What kind of things change after the death of a charismatic leader, like an activist or a politician or a pastor, that sort of thing? What can change after the death of someone like that?
Well, often there's a power play to see who will succeed the leader.
Mhm.
But I guess that was kind of taken care of when Joshua was. I really don't remember the story as to how, did Moses pick him? I don't remember anymore.
I think so.
I think so. I think it was a fairly easy transition, which doesn't always happen.
No, that's true.
But you know, it's tough to follow the hero when someone's been identified as a hero, whether that might be a long-term pastor, it might be a beloved leader of a community, whoever it is, whoever follows that, that's tough. You know, because there's all those expectations. Well, Moses was like this. Now Joshua had better do exactly what Moses did, or we're not going to like it. So I think that would be one dynamic that often happens.
And I think when someone leaves by dying rather than, you know, just resigning and kind of going somewhere else, there's a different dynamic that happens there, because we tend to remember that person in a different way, don't we? You know, John F. Kennedy is often considered one of the greatest presidents of the 20th century, and I wonder if he would have been, you know, had he not died in such a tragic way. I don't know. I'm not suggesting he wouldn't be, but I think sometimes we lionize people like that. Certainly,
And I think
Moses
that's true of Lincoln too. If Lincoln had lived and served a second term and went on to a ripe old age, I'm not so sure we would judge him the way we do. He kind of became a hero in part because he died. You know, he was assassinated. I think that played a major role in evaluating him.
Yeah.
It's the same with Dietrich Bonhoeffer today. I mean, Bonhoeffer was a wonderful theologian, but I don't know that if he had lived to a ripe old age, if he would have the kind of legendary status he does among some theologians.
Mhm.
Part of what made him so powerful was the fact that he died because of his beliefs. The Nazis put him to death. So it does make a difference from,
So this was another way in which this was a new chapter for the Israelites. They not only graduated from the wilderness, they graduated from having Moses with them. And Joshua now took over the reins, who certainly led things in a different way. It refers here to a box that had some things in it. There's a common name we call that box. Does anybody recognize it? Indiana Jones was looking for it. Indiana Jones was looking for it in one of his movies.
Yeah. Oh,
Ark
boy.
of the
Grail?
Covenant.
That's the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah.
Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant.
And that was, was apparently this large, very ornate box that contained the the tablets of the Ten Commandments, as well as a jar of manna, and some legends say it also contained the bones of Joseph, to be brought back to the promised land. And they held on to that box for quite some time. It was apparently lost during one of the invasions of another empire, but they held on to it for centuries. What are some reasons that people hold on to items like that? Are there any heirlooms that are in your family that get passed on that you hold on to for generations?
I guess sentimental value, memories that are associated with it.
Memories. Mm-hmm.
Here it says the people looked at the box and remembered the lessons they learned in the wilderness.
They remembered the lessons they'd learned. Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of some churches have relics in Europe. Like
Yeah.
that was the wedding ring, the finger for the Mary, or something. And we were at a church and I said, yeah, that's Mary's. Supposedly she had a wedding ring, but anyway, the churches were fighting over who it belonged to, because they wanted to put it in the case, because that would draw more people to come to the church.
Yeah.
And I think people look at these relics like it's believable, like she really existed. If they really have something in front of them that they think is real, they think that person lived. The proof, living proof
Yeah.
that you have something. So that's why they collect some of these relics. Not so much for the memory, and sometimes the memory, but sometimes it's because the person really lived.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe over time, that if the ark really was there for centuries, that could serve as a reminder to the people of later generations that not only is this a reminder of the promises and the lessons, but it's a reminder that this really happened, that God really is here. Yeah. Which probably was easy to forget for some people. Okay. Let's read the next paragraph and take a look at the picture too. So, Kim?
The conquest of the land was a slow and painful process. The people were unable to conquer some cities. Others fell before Joshua and the army of Israel. At times, victory came when the partner people did strange things, like blowing trumpets until walls fell down. At other times, victory came when Joshua's army attacked from the outside while oppressed slaves revolted from the inside. When the cities fell, these collaborators became full members of the people of Israel. In one city, a prostitute named Rahab helped Joshua's army. She and her family became part of the covenant people. She is remembered to this day as a great heroine of Israel. Do you want me to keep going, or is that
Sorry,
good?
I'm sorry. I was talking, but I had muted myself because the phone was ringing. Thank you for reading that. What do you see in the picture on the right there?
Joshua's leading an attack.
Mm-hmm. And what's going on inside the city?
Slaves revolted from the inside.
Yeah, so in this particular case, and this is the way some of the conquests are described, it was kind of, Joshua and the army attacked from the outside, and there was something of a revolt from the inside, and together they caused a lot of grief, as it says here, to the leaders of that city. These can be hard chapters of the Bible to read because there's a lot of violence here, and it seems and it's presented as though God is calling these people to brutally attack and destroy cities full of people and to kill everyone, and that can be really hard to read. One thing that might be helpful is that the archaeologists have worked very hard in the land of Israel to see what they can discover, and the archaeological study suggests that it was a much more gradual settling of the land, that just various tribes and city states kind of jostled for dominance, but there's no real sign of the kind of overthrow that is presented in the book of Joshua. So it's quite possible that some of the stories are kind of boastful exaggerations, as people sometimes do. But either way, there's definitely warfare and violence presented here. And what do you think about that? God bless warfare and violence ever?
Well, I don't like this saying that might makes right, or violence is first. But I think there are times in history since the world began when sometimes that kind of approach has to be done. It has to be there. I mean, we're more civilized today, and we should be able to do more with communication, and diplomacy, and not resort to violence. That is interpersonally and with nations, among nations. But I think at one time in history that there was less of that ability, when also God wanted things to happen more quickly, maybe. I don't know what was in his mind, of course, but I was thinking that maybe the violence was necessary for him to get his plan accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
So
it could be. I wasn't around for World War II, but I know that it's often taught as the good war, as a war that really, the reasons for it, at least the reasons for the United States joining, the side of the Allies, are not as controversial as they would be for, say, Vietnam. Do you feel there is such a thing as a just war?
In the case of World War II, I think we had to, doesn't sound good, but destroy people to stop them from destroying other people. And the same thing with the Civil War. No war is
it's a
good.
tough call. It's tough to describe this. We've seen that Erlander in this book kind of describes God's action through these chapters as mending the universe, and does mending sometimes involve tearing things apart?
Yes. Mhm. Something goes wrong in your body, something may have to be removed to be healthy again.
So surgery is a very violent act,
Sure.
and you pay someone a whole lot of money to take a knife and cut you open.
True.
But you do so because you believe it's for the good.
Good.
I don't know the answer to this. This is hard.
Mhm.
It's hard to say that, someone's death is worth the outcome, but
And there's always innocence,
mhm.
innocent people.
Oh, yes.
All right, let's read the last paragraph here on this page.
It's my turn.
Mhm.
Former slaves from Palestinian cities and former slaves from Egypt became one family. Yahweh rejoiced because once again, oppression was broken, slaves were liberated, and new people joined the covenant community. At the same time, God wept because many of the oppressors died. Like the Egyptians who died in the Red Sea, they were victims of their own need to oppress.
Okay. So can you think of anyone in history, someone who has been a victim of their own need to make victims of others?
Hitler.
Sure.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Osama bin Laden.
Mhm.
What about the Civil War, the South fighting the North because they wanted to keep their way of living?
Mhm. So this image here at the bottom of the page is also, I don't know if you keep up with the doodle sheets for each class, but this is on the doodle sheet for today's session. And it says here, welcome to the loyal and benevolent order of people who are no longer oppressed. Now, would you say you're part of that group? You a member of that order or not?
I don't feel oppressed.
So would you say you are a member of it then? Okay. What about the rest of you?
A certain amount of oppression we all have to live with. We all have to pay taxes. We all have to do certain things to get along in a world. And some things are worse than others. I mean, we're certainly not enslaved, although we may be enslaved to a job when we're still working because we have to pay the bills.
Yeah, I think
Depends on the
there's a
degree of
line
oppression.
between being oppressed and having responsibilities.
Right.
I think, the people of Israel, certainly had some commandments to follow. They certainly were not just told, do whatever you want. But it wasn't viewed as oppression. So what's the difference there, do you think?
Well, let me think out loud about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oppression is something you experience when you were put down or held back, perhaps because of your gender or your race or your religion. And I guess I certainly don't think that I've ever been held back because of those things. I certainly know people who have been. I've known women who were oppressed. There's no doubt about that. And some of those women have created new lives for themselves, in spite of the fact that they were considered either by their parents or by their husbands to be not worthy people, and were really mistreated. So they're so I don't feel like I've ever been oppressed. I may have sometimes felt that for a brief time, but I don't think it's true. There, I thought aloud. Somebody else was trying to think
Yeah.
aloud.
Well, I was thinking that way too, because, like, I'm not feeling oppressed, but I know that there are women who are feeling oppressed, and other than myself. And I know there's an oppression of people trying to vote in this country and other countries because of their gender or their race, their thinking, their values. So there's an oppression that's, you have to keep looking at it a little more deeply to really recognize it, because I do, because I'm in such a good place. But when you look around you, you can see that oppression. And I can actually, the whole idea of voting rights even touches me. So I can feel oppressed there if my rights aren't there. Not my gender necessarily, but just as a citizen.
Yeah, I think we can feel like we're part of the group where we're helping to foster like an environment where people don't feel oppressed. So like I don't feel personally oppressed, but that's because of the situation that I was brought up in, but I can help be part of a larger group that helps support, trying to foster an environment that other people don't feel oppressed.
I'm reminded in this conversation of a quote, and I'm not sure if Martin Luther King said this or someone else, but that none of us are free until all of us are free. And I think that's a way that I can see that I'm part of an oppressive system, whether I'm the one being oppressed or not. It's still, that oppression is there, and in a way, it does oppress me in other ways, maybe in a moral way. And like you said, Kim, that calls us to be part of that change then. Yeah, these are hard things. All right, let's turn the page, and we're gonna read through all of page 18 and then talk about it. So I think Janet, you're up. Janet, can you read the line in the illustration and then the first full paragraph, and then maybe Mary, you could read to the end of the page, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. Land, my children, is our inheritance. It's like manna. It belongs to God, and it is given by God to supply the needs of all. The first task of the people with a home was to divide the land and cities Yahweh had given to them as their inheritance. The liberator God was elated when they divided the land, just like they had divided the manna in the wilderness. The larger clans received more land, and the smaller clans received less. No one had too much, and no one had too little. They understood the manna way. They understood that the gift of land was now their manna.
The partner people, those who had come from the wilderness, and those like Rahab, who had joined them, gathered at a place called Shechem, where they renewed the vows of the covenant partnership. They promised to worship and serve only Yahweh, not the gods of the people who still lived in the land. They set up a stone at Shechem. The stone listened to them make their promise. The people knew that the stone would be a witness against them if they ever broke their word. Yahweh was exceedingly glad, and all creation sang and danced for joy.
Thank you. So it sounds pretty good. Like they really were getting off to the right foot here. Can you think of a time in your life when things just were really going well? It was just a really good year. Probably not last year. No, maybe. Can you think of a time when everything was just kind of turning out right?
Guess when I was young and naive and got married, so, at 21 and, I guess then, getting out of my parents' house and being independent. And
Yeah, it felt like you were
Who knew?
following
It
the
wasn't so
right
bad
path.
living
You
with
were
them.
doing the things you needed to do.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
In 2000, everybody in my family was embarking on new adventures.
That's true. Yeah.
I got a new call. Bonnie and I moved. Michael started a new job. Christy graduated from college. All sorts of stuff was happening. It was really quite a year.
It's a good one.
Can you think of of something that's just going right now in one of the communities you're part of, whether that's your family or this area or the country or the world? Like what's something that's just going right now, if there is anything?
Now that I'm not working regularly, I have more time to do artwork and play my dulcimers than I did when I wasn't working. So as far as I'm concerned, that's going right.
Yeah.
That's
Feels
great.
good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm happy with my life right now. I get a monthly check from our government, and I'm free to live my life the way I want to a certain point. And my church is not growing, but we're slowly getting back to normal.
Mhm.
And I'm growing my faith with Bible studies. I'm happy.
Great.
This year has been much better to us than the end of last year for Shirk and I.
Yeah?
I'm
Oh, yes.
glad about that.
Oh yeah, medically, you two faced a lot last year. Yeah.
You did.
So if you look at the picture on the top of the page here, it's not just the people who seem happy with what's going on. Who else is happy?
The animals.
Yeah. You got that sheep that says that includes us, and you got, I guess, what are those, groundhogs or prairie dogs or something?
Prairie dogs.
Well, things are looking up. Maybe there's hope after all. And I find this the picture in the bottom to be exceedingly strange. That the people made a promise, and what did they use as a witness? Not a notary public, but a rock. I guess that was standard then. But they, even the inanimate objects, felt like things were going in the right direction.
So, speaking of talking to trees and stones, that's quite an ancient thing that the Celts used to do. But up at the Columcille, there are rocks everywhere, and I spent a day there talking to the trees and the rocks, and on a retreat by myself, because it's hard to do that with a group. You have to really do a one-to-one with the tree or the rock, and it's a very interesting experience. Yeah.
Do they ever answer you?
They, in a way, yes, sort of validate what I had
Yeah,
thought
you
they
have
were
to be
saying.
very open to it.
Yes, you
and,
do.
know,
It's a
yeah.
meditation, really.
Yeah.
It's a meditation, so you have to really be open to it.
Mm.
Interesting.
Sometimes you don't get responses in the form of words.
No, that's
Other,
exactly it. You don't.
Yeah.
And you have to be, and it seems to me you have to be in tune in order to really, focus. And that's probably why it's so
Right.
much easier by yourself, because you're
Right.
able
And
to
that's
tune
why
better.
you walk the labyrinth.
I mean, right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I'm laughing about inanimate objects, but I communicate with mazes, so yeah. And I think that's what's going on here is this is an image of the people being in tune with God and with their surroundings, and it's a really hopeful beginning.
And everything God made, and it makes it available. And I was just to follow up on what Kim was saying, just time. I haven't done my art and my dulcimer as much as I'd like, but I have got, been making my perfect sourdough bread. I work on it because it's not quite as round as I'd like it, and the next one might be better. So I'm doing, that's what I've been doing with my time, and it's enjoyable because when you have more time and you can't really get out that much because of the weather and because of COVID, you bake bread.
Yeah.
Other things.
It's easier to lock down in the winter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's read the first two paragraphs on page 19 then. I think we're back to you, Kathy.
Okay. Early Israel. Those were good days, not perfect, but good days. The Manna people lived on the land, their inheritance in simplicity and equality. They did not neglect the widows and orphans. Sometimes, however, they forgot both Yahweh and the covenant gift, and they began worshiping the gods of their neighbors. Then society would rot, neighboring people taking advantage of
Disintegration.
Disintegration would harass them. Then the partner people would come to their senses and cry out to Yahweh for help. God raised up individuals called liberators, temporary leaders who would unite the people in the time of crisis. Liberators could come from any clan. They could be women or men. The only requirement was to be spirited by Yahweh.
Okay. Thank you. And there's a picture on the top right of one of those liberators, one of the more famous ones, Deborah. Now, the word liberator here is usually translated in Scripture as judge. In fact, a lot of this comes from the book of Judges, which is the story of these leaders. But liberator might be for us a more accurate term because these people weren't judges in the sense that we think of judges today. They weren't elected officials to to try cases and decide innocence or guilt the way we would think of a judge today. They were more like a short-term kind of a military leader, but not so much as a general, as just someone to rally everyone together and get something accomplished. And they're described as very good leaders for the most part, and certainly Deborah is. When you think of a good leader, what are the kind of qualities that you think of in a leader? Like think of some good leaders you've had in your life, whether that was a boss or a particular leader of the country or someone you consider a good leader. What qualities do they have?
They listen. They're attentive to others.
Okay.
They're fair.
Did you say fair?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a hard quality to find in
Yeah.
a boss sometimes.
it's hard to be fair sometimes.
Mhm.
I even find that as a parent.
And when people, leaders listen, they want to understand the people that they're leading.
Mm,
So they're in tune with the people that they're leading, and including them in the that whole leadership. The person can't do it alone. They include the people as they're leading. Partners.
I feel like someone that is a good motivator or also leads by example. I feel like if they're willing to roll up their sleeves and kind of set an example for everyone else, that people respond to them better than somebody that just dictates stuff.
yeah. I think that was one of the qualities of these liberators or judges, is that they were not, career politicians or kings in a dynasty. They were kind of normal people who got raised up from the people to accomplish this particular thing.
I find it strange that they also accepted women
Mhm.
as liberators back
It is
then.
surprising. It is. Yeah.
I would have thought back then their place was just to have the children and raise them and keep the house.
And I find it also surprising that that the stories kept the women in it. Sometimes if someone who's part of an underprivileged group does something amazing, it doesn't always get recorded that way. Sometimes the people in power kind of wash it a little differently, but very clearly Deborah
It's only a
is
woman, we could leave her out of the story.
yeah, but they didn't. Whoever wrote down these stories, and these stories were probably written down long after they were first told. Most of these stories were passed on by word of mouth before they were written. They didn't forget about Deborah.
Mm.
So I think that is remarkable given the role that women usually had in Israel. Yeah. Another kind of role that these judges had was to be kind of advisors and almost spiritual leaders for the people at a time. And who would you turn to if your private life were kind of falling apart? The way that their communal life would sometimes fall apart. Who would you turn to for advice or help?
Well, I pray to God, but I also would be talking to a good friend.
Friend.
Mhm. And usually my friends, when I'm talking about really personal issues, would be a friend or would be a woman. But, at this point in my life, although there have been men in my life who I've confided in that way too.
And sometimes it depends on the type of advice or help that's needed or guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you want to speak to a woman, and sometimes if I'll go to my husband and ask his advice on something.
Mm-hmm.
And if it has to do with my faith, I would ask you or my cousin.
Okay. We're blessed with different people in different circumstances. Right. Sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. Sometimes it may be a person you just think is very wise and you don't see them very often, but you might ask them their advice because that it would be valuable to you. For some reason, it would be good for you to listen, to ask them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm not on a regular basis. So it could be someone you don't see that much.
In certain circumstances, it might be better to talk to somebody who's not involved in what you're, sometimes
Yes.
it's helpful to get an outsider perspective, depending on what it is, Okay. All right, let's read the final chapter on 19. I think it's June's turn.
The liberators, excuse me, understood that they were leaders only because they were needed for a specific period of time. They understood they were never to become kings or permanent big deals. They served as leaders within the society of partners who claimed Yahweh as their only true leader and liberator. These were the days of early Israel. No big deal. Oppressor class emerged. All had enough and no one had too much. Yahweh smiled and said, "There is hope. There is hope."
Okay. Now, this picture on the left here, can you identify a leader in that picture?
How about the kids following the person singing and dancing?
Okay.
I would think the person in the front is the leader.
The leader of the whole town?
No, of the kids.
Oh,
Okay,
leader.
so a leader of that little
Oh.
group there, sure. Mhm.
You mean the one that's doing like a marching thing or a
Yeah.
dancing? in
Almost
front
looks like
of
a
the-
Pied Piper to me, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the left of the trees, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Identify any other leaders in here?
It looks like the other guy over there is picking apples and he's telling all the other people how to pick apples.
It could be.
But he could be a leader.
But I think it's telling that we kind of really have to look hard and kind of almost add to it to see
up
who
a
the leader is
story.
here. Yeah, make up a story. Because it looks here like there is no definite leader of the town. Maybe there's a leader of a small group. Maybe there's the apple leader here, but
Oh, thank you.
but what do you see going on in this picture?
No, no, he gave me a bowl for cereal.
There's a real sense of community.
Hmm.
They're not
People are
fancy.
working and playing together.
No, but he did give me,
And notice where the houses are. What kind of shape are the
so that's
houses
how I
in?
knew you were calling. I thought, what's that? What's
In a
that?
semicircle.
They're like in a semicircle around.
Because I remember so
I'm gonna
many
mute
flats.
Janet here.
Yeah,
There we go. Around the central town square, and you see people are gathered there.
It's open, it's not closed.
Mm-hmm.
The circle is not, it's not completed because then it's open to
Mm.
others.
Mm-hmm.
In the center of the town is the well, and that could open up all sorts of interesting imagery.
Yeah.
To talk about what the water of life is. You could do all sorts of things with that if you want to create a story here.
Yeah, and that's an image that gets used in the Gospel of John when Jesus goes to the town in Samaria and encounters a woman going to the town well to collect water. This is, a lot of towns would have had a central well like this.
And he treats her as an equal.
Mm.
They, in essence, have a theological discussion, which was unheard of, that a man would allow a woman to have her theological opinion.
And yet in this image, it looks like that would be okay, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of hard to tell who's a man and a woman here.
Mm.
Oh gosh, I was thinking the same thing, Karen.
Because
I guess we have to go by the hair.
the robes. Well, man, look at Pastor. I mean, when Dave says you cut your hair too short, and I said, what about yours? Let's go there. But I noticed that there's a woman in black or a man in black leading another person as if they're the caregiver.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
I
they're
see.
like the leader for that
It
person.
could be, yeah, yeah,
And then I'm seeing a man or woman with the arm around another person. Maybe there's a parent, parenting leader.
yeah.
And then the one with, of course, there are all kinds of things in there.
Yeah, there's all
Right.
kinds of things going on
Yeah.
here. It looks like some people are playing, some people are working, some people are
Working, yeah.
talking. There's this
Seems
little
like
group of
everybody's
three here.
happy and-
This little group of three here. I'm not sure if they're talking or if they're doing like the hokey pokey or what, but
It could be praying.
it could be praying. Yeah, I should have thought of
Or
that.
they could be gossiping.
Or they could be gossiping.
I would
And-
think that would be done at the well with the women.
Oh, that would be at the well. Okay.
we still do that today. That's what the water cooler is, right? It's always at a place of water. And what word is put here?
Shalom.
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 Does this feel like shalom to you? Like this overriding sense of
Yeah.
peace and
Yeah.
community and yeah.
Yes.
And there's
Everyone
also a
feels like they
little,
have a part.
I'm sorry, what?
Everyone seems to have a role,
Hmm.
have a part in this whole group. That no one's left out. Everyone's got.
You know what this picture brings to mind to me?
What?
When we used to have the coffee hour after worship,
Hmm.
people sitting together,
Mhm.
enjoying each other's company, bringing each other up to date on
Yeah.
their life and socializing.
Yeah. How neat would it be if when we bring that back eventually, hopefully this year, how neat would it be to have a baptismal font in the center of that? Because it occurs to me, we actually have two baptismal fonts in the building right now. What if we put the other one right in the middle of the fellowship hall for coffee hour?
Let's try it.
That'd be kind of neat.
It would start a conversation.
Yeah. But there's a little bit of foreboding here, because what does it say on the bottom left?
Page 23.
Yeah.
Or
So we can peek ahead to page 23. And that's what we're gonna see.
yeah,
Yep.
It changes, and it even says thereafter, see page 19. So this beautiful, almost utopia may have happened for a time, but it didn't last forever. I think that's actually a good place for us to stop today. We do have one more page left of this chapter, but next time we'll start there and we'll also move into chapter 6. And chapter 6 isn't as long, so maybe we can actually get through both of them next time. Any last thoughts or questions or comments?
I have one more observation.
Oh, go ahead.
There's something in that last paragraph about they understood they were never to become kings or permanent big deals. I think the real challenge a leader faces is to know when it's time to back off, and maybe even to leave that leadership position. There's such a thing as a leader outstaying his or her welcome. I don't know that it necessarily means that a leader has to leave where they are, but they may have to change their style of leadership. I remember when I was nearing retirement, I said to my mutual ministry committee, I'm at a point where I either just need to leave this church or I need to retool and become a different kind of leader.
Yeah.
Because the church had changed, society was changing, and I wasn't changing. I was leading from an old leadership style that I felt was no longer appropriate. But the only way I could change that would be a lot of hard work. I would needed a sabbatical and taken some really serious thinking about how I was going to now lead. And it was a heck of a lot simpler just to retire and say, I'm out of here. I didn't want to do that hard work.
It's very lucky that happened after you were 65.
Yes, absolutely. Because if I would have been 55 or 60, I would have had to do something. It was a point where I really needed to change my style of leadership or leave that congregation. It was just very clear to me. It was very clear, and I think that's true. That's why someone once said pastors should never stay more than 10 years. And I'm not so sure that's true, but I think pastors need to be able to retool after 10 years, maybe. You know, I mean, that's a real generalized statement, but it's just, and I suspect that's true in a lot of leadership positions.
You know, when I was working in the bank as a branch manager, their policy was to transfer us at least every 2 years
Hmm.
to another location to rotate managers. And maybe that was why. Yeah.
And some churches do that with their clergy, you know, the Roman Catholic Church as well as the United
Right.
Methodist Church.
Right.
You know, the clergy tend to stay just a few years and then they're sent somewhere else. And there's probably benefit to that. There's probably also some downside to that too.
There's drawbacks because a long-term pastor builds relationships. So there's some value, I think, in saying to a pastor, well, let's think about your leadership style. How might it be different? Because we really want you here. We really like you. We like the fact that we have good relationships, but some things maybe need to change. So, you know, that was my experience, at least, as I think back on my ministry. There were just times I needed to change who I was. You know?
When you started talking about that, I thought of the story that gets told about George Washington, that you know, that apparently when you know, after the war and when the country was getting started, there were people who wanted to make him king, and he refused. And there were people who wanted him to stand for a third term, and you know, he very well might have been elected to a third term, but he did not want to do that. He thought that, you know, he needs to. I mean, I don't know how true all this is, but that's the way the legend is told, and I think that that's an important part of why we see him as a good leader, is he knew when to step back. Yeah. Anything else? Any other reflections or thoughts before we close? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. We'll pick up here next week, and
Thank you.
stay
very
warm
much.
this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, everybody.
Enjoy your
Bye.
day, Janet. Have a
Bye,
good
everyone.
one.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I
Good
will.
one.